Yeah, you may only have 500 followers on Twitter and Instagram or whatever, but that's 500 more people than this brand can reach right now. So you may not be able to get $1,000 a month, but I bet you if you ask for 100, they give it to you.
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works: How to Decide, Believe, and Begin to Live Your Best Life. Whatever you're doing or going to do for your side hustle, chances are it could benefit from having sponsors. People paying you, supporting you in what you're producing. That's only one reason why you want to catch this episode, because today's guest is going to help you with that. And he's both engaging and entertaining. After all, Todd Hancock was an on-air radio personality at a rock station for 14 years in Vancouver, one of Canada's major markets. His story is unique in that what was his full-time job today is his side hustle. I know that sounds strange, but it'll all make sense when you hear from Todd. Be sure to catch the wrap-up at the end, where I'll help you muster up the courage to charge what you're really worth. Whether it's a product, a service, or you're seeking sponsors, it's a challenge for a lot of creatives. But first, here's my conversation with full-time radio arts and entertainment instructor and side hustle host of the Toddcast Podcast, Todd Hancock. Hey, Todd, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you again for having me tonight. And as mentioned, before we press play record there, pretty cool idea for a podcast. I'm excited to hear your podcast moving forward.
Thanks, Todd. Every guest I've had on the show so far has had full-time work. Then they started a side hustle that eventually became successful enough that they quit their, quote unquote 9 to 5, or they kept both going.
Right.
But your story kind of flips that around. Your Toddcast podcast, now 279 episodes strong. That's quite an accomplishment, Todd. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But you started the podcast as your full-time work, but now it's the side hustle. There's a backstory there.
Right.
How did all that start?
Well, I think probably a lot of people that are going to listen to this podcast and watch this podcast will know me from my time working at 99.3 The Fox. I was there from 99 through 14.
Vancouver, BC, Canada.
Vancouver rock station, rock radio, yeah. And so for the last 12 years of my time there, I was their afternoon host from 3 till 7.
Nice. And
so when I got let go, of course, with all that time, I had all of this severance. So money's coming in every 2 weeks, just like I'm working there. So when I got let go, a lot of my friends were like, well, do you need to go back to radio? Could you maybe do a podcast? Like, think of all the places that you've hosted events. Maybe an owner or a GM, somebody that can, pull the purse strings and give you $300, $400, $500, $1,000 a month. So I had all these friends saying, like, start it up. So suddenly I'm like, okay, cool. So I started reaching out to all these businesses. And they were all saying, well, how much is it? Like, what's it going to sound like? Do you have something for us to hear? And of course, at that point, I was like, well, I have an idea in my head. And because I am Todd from CFox, you know that it will be good. Like, I'm not going to just put something out that's garbage.
Right.
And trust me on that, it'll be good. Anyway, long story short, I got enough initial reaction, sponsorship from Hard Rock Vancouver to the Roxy, Red Truck Beer, Milano Coffee, and all these local businesses that I was able to take off running and not worrying about, can I pay my mortgage? Do I need to go back to radio? And then, now hindsight, I look back and, oh, sure, I've had some great years, made a lot of money, had some great sponsors. I've had some amazing shows and incredible guests. But as you're going through that ride, it's not like, yeah. I mean, it is, but it's not that. It's like, hang on tight. Holy crap, that sponsor just dropped off. I'm losing that much money now. And I'm trying to get that. And that interview just crashed through. And, looking back, sure, hindsight, easy peasy. But holy, has it been a lot of work.
Well, yeah, because although you had a tremendous skill set going into it based on your previous work, the whole podcasting space itself would have been new to you. Now, all those local companies that you mentioned that ended up being sponsors,
Yeah.
did they come banging down your door when they heard that you were starting this up, or was that something that you had to actually do the knocking?
I did the knocking, I guess, initially, and I still kind of do the knocking.
Sure.
But more than anything, I think what it was to get the Hard Rock Vancouver on. So the Toddcast was brought to you by the Hard Rock Vancouver. Now, as soon as I could say that, suddenly Red Truck Beer was like, really? Very cool. Okay, cool. Well, why don't you come have a meeting with us? And now I can say, oh, it's Hard Rock and Red Truck. And the Roxy was like, we would love to have a show. Right.
Nice.
So I think it was that. As soon as that kind of happened, it was that snowball effect. Still to this day, it's like that.
And how long was it before you signed up that first sponsor, or did that start from the get-go?
From the get-go. I mean, I had
Nice.
sponsors
Yeah.
on before I'd even released. I had sponsors before I even did an interview.
Nice.
Which, of course, I wasn't able to charge them until my severance with CFOX was done. But like literally the next day, I fired up the podcast. Like the next day after my severance was done.
So you had the benefit of the severance to do all the groundwork, get the sponsors lined up, that sort of thing.
Had all that money coming
in.
I didn't need to necessarily do anything more than anything. I just had to interview a bunch of people. So and then from there, and like I said, it's just been a bit of a grind, but it's so worth it.
Because you have multiple people per episode, right?
Yeah.
Like three?
Three. So I have a music guest, sports guest, entertainment, lifestyle.
And I guess you chose, well, obviously I can see the music piece because of your background. Why the sports element?
Oh, I'm a big sports guy too.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I love sports. I love, hockey, of course. I love MMA fights. I love soccer, wrestling. I just love sports. I love playing it, but I'm not as good as I used to be because I'm getting to be an old man hips.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why the sports and honestly, that is the reason why, is because I'm a sports fan. It's same for entertainment. Of course, I love movies and I love just being thrown into that world of theater of the mind and, stuff that I do for a living. I do it on the radio and I don't necessarily do it on television, but it's the same premise. The premise remains. You're trying to engage and captivate the audience with what you're doing and how you say things and what you're bringing to the table.
Sure.
But more than anything, and I hate to say this, quite honestly, it was because it was just more revenue streams.
Okay.
So now I could be the Hard Rock is brought to you by Toddcast, which now it's the Pint. I should probably mention that.
Okay.
Pint, downtown Vancouver, 455 Abbott. But yeah, so at the time it was that, but then it was like, okay, well, the Roxy's going to do the music guest, which is Pineapple Sound now. And same thing, like who's gonna sponsor the sports guest? Who's gonna sponsor the entertainment guest? So suddenly now there's more revenue streams.
You've got 3 times the revenue now because you've got 3.
Yeah, well, I got 4 times because I was a title sponsor, music, sports, entertainment. And then there's other features within the podcast as well. So it's kind of like you're almost highlighting some of the best clips of the interviews. But now I'm spinning that into another take, getting another revenue stream and another revenue stream. So
nice.
But thankfully, I understood radio.
Right.
Because that's essentially what I did is I just took radio and I just applied it to podcasting. I don't know if what I'm doing is right. It's working. So
there's your answer.
Yeah, it's working for me. I don't know if it worked for anybody else, but yeah, it's definitely working for me.
Well, one of the things about podcasting too is we get to bring in our interests, right? Like the things that you're passionate about, the music, the sports, the entertainment. You can mash up all those to create a successful podcast.
Yeah, like whereas you're specific to like side hustle hero podcast. You're very like you could tell somebody what your podcast name is, and there's no way around it. You know what it to expect. Whereas I'll still to this day have friends like, I listen to your podcast here and there, or like, oh, what's it about? It's like, what's it about? What are you talking about? It's like basically a radio show, just once a week.
Right.
Because there's nothing for me. The common thread is just that I'm trying to get stories from people.
Yes.
Like you said off the top there, it's all about the stories. So if you can find that where your guest is ready to share and it's super engaging, that's really hard to find sometimes.
And I love sharing people's stories. And while the common thread for me and for this show is the side hustle, the guests are so diverse. Like my last guest is a beekeeper in Houston, Texas. Right. And there we are, radio personality today. I love it.
That's great.
So given all those things that you mentioned that have been going into the podcast, what sort of time commitment are you looking at and like per week, and how much you actually spending on editing and trying to generate or look after your sponsors?
Yeah. Good question. That kind of just really varies, I guess. It really depends on, like a few things. It depends on how driven I am that week to want to do things. How many promos do I want to build? How much production do I want to do? Okay. But on average, it changed. I thankfully, again, I have all those skills from radio that doesn't take me very long. Like, as much as I do so much stuff, like if you follow me on social media, it's not spam, but it's damn close to it.
Okay.
Now, spam is when, you don't want that in your timeline. Mm-hmm. All I'm doing is giving you content. Don't forget that cool interview. Don't forget that great guest. Look at this great podcast. Look at this full live performance we did. It can be misconstrued as spam, but at the same time, the way I look at that stuff is, if you don't want that in your timeline, you're not really my fan then.
How many tweets are you sending out a day?
Oh, a couple hundred.
Because I looked at it the other day in preparation for our interview, and it's like, wait, I got to be seeing that wrong. That was like 3 minutes ago, 1 minute ago. Like, wow.
Yeah, we definitely, that's the one. We take advantage of Twitter only because it can be that. It's very fleeting. Twitter is very like, jump on, see what's going on, and that's it, you're gone. So, at least we're, giving us a chance to be seen with something that's very cool. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of like getting the click-throughs and stuff, and maybe we're doing it wrong, but I don't know. Again, it seems to be working for me.
So what made you switch to doing the podcast full-time to apparently now part-time as a side hustle?
Yeah. So that came maybe a couple of years into doing the podcast, and I got a call from BCIT, from the Radio Arts and Entertainment course, which is the course I graduated from in 96, 97.
Yeah. So for our non-Vancouver, non-Canadian listeners, that's British Columbia Institute of Technology.
That's right. It's like the biggest radio course in Canada.
Nice.
I'm sure Ryerson out in Toronto would probably argue, but we're better. We're better. So anyway, I got asked to come up, and just kind of be a presence and mark some assignments and mentor some students, and just kind of, be there and help run the radio station, because there's a campus radio station. And on the phone, I said to them, well, honestly, I'm just too busy. I don't have time. Mm-hmm. And they were like, whoa, okay, not the answer we were expecting. Like, can you come in and just, hang out for a day and like have a coffee, and maybe we'll talk and see how we can make this work. So, I went and met with them, and I just said, they're like, well, what's holding you back? Because I'm like, I would love to do it. I think it's a great, it's a great course. Of course, it's where I went to school, but I just don't have the time. Like, I can't idly be sitting by if I need to do stuff for the podcast, or write something for my website, or send out emails to my sponsors, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they basically said to me, like, we don't care if you play Minesweeper. If you're done all of your work with the students, like, you can do whatever. Right. So, and I said, okay, cool.
Is that literally Monday to Friday there?
That's Monday to Friday, 9 to 3:30.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah. Wow. So it's easy hours. And ultimately what I'm doing there is, again, I'm helping run the radio station, mentoring students and letting them know what they did right, what they did wrong, how to fix things, maybe open up, different, like a brainstorm session.
Right.
Trying to get creative and opening up those avenues and those, areas where they're maybe not necessarily thinking that way.
And what a benefit for them, since you are so engaged in the podcasting space, that you are up on what's happening and what's new and what's changing, to be able to integrate that into your teaching.
Right. Well, you would think that, the BCIT Radio Arts and Entertainment would have asked me to come join them because of my 20 years in radio.
Right.
But ultimately it was about the podcasting. It's really exciting to see what you're doing as, past alumni of this course. And, of course, we know you from CFOX, but what you're doing in podcasting is because when I started it, there really wasn't many podcasts in the city.
Right.
So yeah, surprisingly, because I asked them, once a couple years in or whatever, I was like, by the way, like, what was it that got you guys to call me in the first place? Like, it really, truly came out. If you had asked me like the day prior to that phone call, what are the chances BCIT will call you to offer you a job? I'd been like 0.00000. Like, truly came out of left field. But yeah, they were like, well, it was the podcast, like just how you're setting things up and your events that you're doing and hosting and all the marketing you're doing online and everything. It was all that stuff. So
yeah, and so it really is to their benefit as well that you keep this as a side hustle, that you got because of all that engagement, right? So it's, I mean, 100%. It's a win-win all around. So as an instructor in that space, then what opportunities do you see that exist today for someone wanting to start a side hustle in broadcasting and in radio and entertainment?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things, right? I mean, just look at everything that we're seeing on our phones on a daily basis, all of that stuff. You can become a famous TikToker. Like, what? Who thought that besides Milli Vanilli, who thought
right.
you could get famous by lip syncing? Yeah, I mean, podcasting, what we're doing. So it's just a matter of creating that content and trying to monetize it.
Yes.
And you monetize it by your network. Who do you know that owns a store? Who do you know that is a general manager of a store? What do you use on a regular basis that maybe you could do a barter trade with, so you don't need to spend $200 on X product every month? Instead, you can spend it on bread and milk and eggs and whatever. So it's not always money. You don't need to. It doesn't always need to be money for the side hustle. If there's something that, like for me, I drink a lot of beer. I drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of gins and whatever, and all that stuff is like, well, I don't have to pay that anymore because Red Truck Beer gives me beer all the time. Nude Beverages gives me, gin and vodka drinks all the time. Milano Coffee gives me coffee all the time. So.
And I would imagine some of the companies that yourself or a podcaster would turn to, some of them would have maybe a set idea of the arrangement that they want to create. But at the same time, you could probably go in there and be very creative and just negotiate what works for both you and them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Whether it's a straight barter trade or whether there's actually money paid or whether it's a percentage of sales or.
Yeah. And initially when I first started to try to find sponsorship, I would just kind of like work in reverse, meaning how long is it going to take for me to do what I promised this business? It's going to take me 10 hours. Okay, well, I charge $100 an hour. Cost you $1,000 to do this for the month. So it's going to take me 3 hours. Okay, what's $300?
Should it take you 3 hours to do what?
Whatever
actually
it is.
Put the podcast together, or
put their piece together, like say social media stuff, or it's like I'm building a show for a venue in the city or whatever it is. I kind of just work in reverse, and that I've been doing that for the whole time.
As far as taking a look at how long something is going to take you, and then figuring out the hourly rate you want to get paid, and then work back from there.
Yeah, and
therefore, then this is what the contract needs to be.
Yep. And it's tricky with the sponsorship is so hard because you don't want to like price yourself out.
Right.
But you also don't want to be like, oh, it's $300 a month. Oh, 300, that's it. Holy crap. Oh, did I say 3? I meant 6. So it's that too, right? Like you can't, it's a really fine line to walk, right?
Well, I found that in the speaking business too, right? Like you've got a speaker for a 20-minute keynote is charging $1,000 versus they're prepared to spend 10 grand. They're like, okay, what's wrong with this person if they're only asking for 1,000? Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, totally. And even though, chances are it's just because they don't know and they shouldn't be negotiating for themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's certain companies that came to you.
Yeah.
And others
not many though, but yeah.
Yeah. And then others that you had to basically step out and knock on the doors. How did you feel about asking? What was going on inside?
Well, I was feeling like I needed to feed my wife and kids.
Okay. That was
so there was motivator. I haven't ever felt like it's weird to ask for it. First off, I guess, because also I come from that world, even though radio is not podcasting, it kind of is, and I just never thought anything weird of it because that's what people associate me with anyway. They think radio when they think of Todd Hancock.
Back at the radio station, those same companies would have been paying the radio station for advertising, but now they're paying you.
Yeah,
same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I never really ever felt it odd to ask for that stuff. And again, it's because I also know that they're getting something. It's not like I'm just, spare 25 cents here. Like I'm giving them something. It's not there is a return. It's not that they're just giving me something because like I'm also giving them something in return, right?
Because you're valuing what you're producing, what you're putting out there, what you're worth.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I never really felt weird about that.
What I have found in working with people through the years, especially the creatives, the artists, a lot of them have difficulty charging. Yeah. Have you found that with some of your students?
Well, they're not generally at that level to start charging, even though I do steer them in that direction and say you may only have 500 followers on Twitter and Instagram or whatever, but that's 500 more people than this brand can reach right now. Right. So you may not be able to get $1,000 a month, but I bet you if you ask for 100, they give it to you. So yeah, I don't know that they're really at that level. And if they do talk to me, I'll beat that out of them real quick because we're doing something that's like it's hard to come by. Creative, good content is like even when you do have the really good content, I think my podcast is incredible.
Yes.
Narcissism aside, as a broadcaster and as somebody that gets this industry, I feel that my podcast is as good as it could possibly get. But yet, are my numbers crazy? Not really. Can I get people out to events? Sometimes. So it never ends. Like it's always a constant grind.
Yeah. And if you're ever looking to revamp the courses at BCIT that you're teaching, you're adding something else, I would strongly recommend something on that piece about feeling that ability to charge. Even if it's that $100, maybe it's not the 1,000 right away, but maybe it's the 100. Just to start.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the students that I mentor, they all get that from me because they're very aware of what I do. It's not like I'm telling them to do things and then hopefully it's right. It's like everything I'm telling you, like go listen to my podcast. Everything I just told you, I do in my podcast. Everything I do, I do on my social media feeds as well. So
it gives you so much more credibility as an instructor to be able to say that.
Right? Now, they can go, well, Todd's all windbag. Well, there's the podcast.
Plus, if they sense that you have that belief in them, even if they don't believe it, the fact that you believe in them will spur them on.
Oh, for sure. And you can try. And you can really see it too. Some of the students are very, they're just so naturally gifted at the gab and at storytelling. And it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If there was something that if you could turn back the clock and do something or some things differently with the podcast, would there be anything that pops into mind? 7-8 years in now?
Yeah, 8.5. I think the only thing I would probably do different would be maybe update my sponsors better.
Like keep them in the loop?
Yeah, well, more so what I do now for sponsors, if they're curious of how things are going online or with the streams or whatever, I will specifically go to my Twitter and Instagram and Facebook feeds and find all of the times I mentioned their businesses, all the engagements. I'll screenshot everything.
Okay.
You reached 12,000 people this week, of which 470 interacted with your stuff, and this many people hit your website. Here's the spins on the podcast. Here's the spin specifically for what you're sponsoring. But I didn't do that for probably the first 4 years because I wasn't thinking that. It took me some time to understand that. And without, knock wood, without jinxing myself, the majority of my sponsors present day have been on for years.
Nice.
Because I do that, I think. And also because they want to see me succeed and they do know me. These are people that I know that I've hosted events for or, whatever it is. So I think that there's part of that as well. And
clearly they're getting value too, or they wouldn't have been sticking around.
And they're getting value. Yeah. Right. Like ultimately, and I also think, some businesses, all this marketing is a write-off. So not only are you getting mentioned in a podcast that gets, and I get about 10 to 12,000 plays a month. So it's not huge numbers, like 300-400 plays a day kind of thing.
Okay.
If you're a business and you can get your ad in a podcast that gets that many ears on your stuff, eventually it works. It's the same principle as radio. And radio works. We all know it works. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I love it.
Right? So, and you know that because of repetition.
Yes. And what do you like most about teaching full-time and running a side hustle? Because it sounds like you could probably jump fully into one or the other, but you're choosing to do both.
Well, I like the podcast because it gives me the chance to still have the chops to do a show.
Okay.
Because for the majority of my podcasts, that's a one take. I push play record as I start going. I have some notes on the side that I kind of bounce around just like I did in radio.
Sure.
And unless I totally botch something, it's going. That's what's going out. I'm not going to like, oh crap, I better try that again. I don't do that, right? So it gives me a chance to still have radio chops. It gives me a chance to talk to some incredible people. Over the years, there's been guests that I'm like, how did I get that person? I can't even believe I got them on, right?
What are some of your favorite moments there?
Music, Def Leppard's guitarist. I talked to him. I talked to Vinnie Paul, the drummer from Pantera, who passed away a couple of years back. Right, I think it was actually one of his last interviews.
Wow.
Nickelback's Chad Kruger invited us over to his house for an overnighter, and that was fun. Smashing Pumpkins, Jimmy Chamberlain, a ton of sports people. Bo Horvat from the Vancouver Canucks, Captain Kirk McLean drinking beers in this studio with me, which is very cool.
Any memorable moments from any of them? Stuff happening?
I think overall, almost every interview kind of has something like that.
Okay.
I do my best to try to. Of course, I want to know about what they're known for, right? But I do want to know, like, what are you watching? Like, what was your first concert like? Like, have you had a near-death story? And most people have.
Have you have one? Do you have a near-death story?
God, I have so many. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I was a crazy kid. Yeah,
really?
I have some near-death stories. I almost got hit by a train, like so close that, and I was like straight up Stand By Me moments. I'm running across the train trestle in Kitimat, over the Kitimat. I think it was the Kitimat River, maybe the Nechako. Anyway, so I'm running over this train trestle, and maybe 300-400 meters up is the road kind of, or the tracks kind of do a bit of a bend, and the train's coming around the corner. Woo, woo. My brother's running. He's 3.5 years older, and he's got a buddy. I got a buddy with me. They're all running. They've all made it across. I get stuck. My shoe gets stuck in this trestle, and I'm trying to pull it out. And my brother's just, leave the shoe, leave the shoe. So I left the shoe, start running, and he's like, jump. And I just jumped into this big prickly thorn bush. And as I'm jumping, I could feel the rush of the train. Like, that was probably my closest to death.
Holy.
So close. I've had a black bear chase me. Probably a good 100-200 meters, to the point where, like, it felt like every single hair on my body was on end. I was so petrified and scared. I couldn't even talk. I was so scared.
Was it a mom and her cubs?
Nope, just a mom.
Yeah.
Just a big one. Yeah.
Just
a big one. Yeah, but I was so petrified that I was trying to scream and like, raw, and like get all aggressive, and I just turned around. I was like, I couldn't even say anything. I was so scared.
Wow.
Yeah. So I generally try for like what we're doing. I try for just train of thought conversation and see where it goes. And yeah.
What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Todd?
Toddhancock.ca.
Okay.
I guess is my website. And then everything, whether it's YouTube or Twitter, Instagram, and all that, Toddcast Podcast. TODDCAST podcast.
And Twitter, right?
And Twitter.
Yeah.
Yes. Get ready for a barrage of content.
You've been warned.
Yes. I know I should make a video. I should
really.
Hey, thanks for following me, but hold up, lots of content coming.
Well, you're clearly someone who knows how to hustle, knows how to get things done.
Yeah.
Todd, what's your number one tip to encourage someone to take action on their side hustle dream?
Ooh, yeah, you're not gonna like that. It's just hard work. It's just hard work. Just do it. You have to take the step. There's never a better time than right now. So if you have an idea and you want to see it succeed, you're the only person that's going to be able to get there, right? So it takes some drive, it takes some initiative, it takes determination, and no better time than right now. Fire it up, and it's only going to get better in time. But yeah, that's the biggest thing is just, to do it. As much as I wish I had like a magical answer, it is seriously just do it.
Well, thank you so much, Todd, for sharing your ideas, your inspirations, and for being today's Side Hustle Hero.
Awesome.
Too often people feel uncomfortable about charging what they're worth. If that's a struggle for you, you'll need to remind yourself of what you bring to the table, especially if you're embarking on a brand new side hustle. But of course, you've got skills and experience that are transferable to your new venture. And keep in mind, how you deliver your product or service is unique to you. No one else has quite the combination of skills and experiences, passions and talents that you have. So what you offer is indeed unique. No one could do it exactly like you can. A number of years ago, I was presenting a management seminar in a major US city. There were a couple of hundred people in the room. And I was talking about ways that they could show appreciation to their employees. It was a public seminar, so attendees were from dozens of different industries. One of the easy and cost-effective ways I suggested they could do that is through the use of Post-it notes. When they saw or overheard an employee doing something great, they could leave them a note about it where the employee would later find it. Something like, "Congrats on keeping calm dealing with that client," or "Awesome presentation today." Well, there were several police officers in attendance, and at the next break, one of the sergeants came up to me and explained that he had been doing just that with his officers, using the Post-it notes. And he said, "You know what? Despite the tough guy or tough gal attitude, they really do appreciate those notes. So much so," he said, "they keep them." He said, "I've seen them in their lockers, in their desks. Everyone likes to be appreciated." The reason I share this with you is that we can all benefit from having the equivalent of those Post-it notes, things that remind us of what we bring to the table, of how what we do and put out into the world matters. It makes a difference. Well, how do you do that for yourself? You create it. Begin to collect things that remind you of your worth, of your value. They could be kept in a file folder, a box, or create a special folder on your phone. It could be a folder in your photo favorites. Call it your VR folder. Yeah, VR. In this case, VR would stand for value reminder. Take photos of things that have meaning to you and store them in the folder. Photos of special birthday messages you've received, diplomas you've earned, photos of you having a truly epic time, or of you being presented with an award. Anything at all that reminds you of your worth, your value, and what you bring to the table. Then, when you're about to step out and seek a corporate sponsor for something you're doing, or funding for your venture, or telling someone what you charge, and you feel some hesitancy, you can take a moment to scroll through your VR folder, then shoulders back, big smile, and go for it. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find the links we mentioned and the show notes on our website, sidehustleheropodcast.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. I'd love to hear about your VR folder. Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @JoanPosivy. Thanks for listening, and hustle on.